then we also opened up, being formerly incarcerated from my experience, reentry home. And in a very different way where we'll take no state funding, take no government funding for this, to where people coming out of prison can get their agency back and have a place that they can call home with their own room that doesn't mimic the carceral system at all. And they don't have to pay, but they can just stay there as long as they need to till they're ready to go out and to get out into society and however they want to do it. And just keep asking them too, what do they want for support? What do they need for support? And so that their agency is given back to them. And that's the world we want to keep going into. And even in our organization, we're doing the same thing with our core staff and our core fam, we call it, is we do everything in circle relationship. We hire out a relationship. We know everybody and we sit down and we process. Our meetings we'll talk about some things that we're doing on the work side, some projects we got going on, but then somebody's always doing that internal work with this group, so we're really building relationship with each other and we're always there for each other. And then it also helps with our conflicts. And so that's the world we want to see is built through relationship and to keep moving it forward in that way. And that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. Another Gulf is possible. Hey, Patricia. I just want to read this because it was so beautiful when I read it. I said, yeah, this resonates. The people of the Gulf South and the global South stand united and firm. We need a just transition for the sake of the life and livelihoods of our communities, our cultures, and our ecosystems. We will no longer stand to be a sacrifice zone for this country. We demand justice and equity. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Hello. Okay. It's kind of intimidating, a microphone sometimes. One, I'd like to thank you all for being here. I want to thank the organizers and all the volunteers and the panelists. You all have been amazing and very inspiring. Greetings in the language of the Eshtogna people, also known as the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe of Texas, that I've been a part of for the past few years, and also residing on the lands of the Eshtogna. And that is the very southern tip of Texas, so where the mouth of the Rio Grande is and where it connects to the Gulf of Mexico, I'm in that little area. So real far south, right on the border. But as we talk about just, and we talk about community, one of the things that I bring to the collaborative is I did a lot of work with the No Border Wall Coalition, a disgusting racist wall that is being put through the lands of the Eshtogna and rapidly pushing us towards climate change because they're ripping out all the vegetation and they're preventing us from being on our own lands. It's far from the river in many places, so it's ridiculous. It's disgusting and racist, all to keep people out. And when I worked at the Butterfly Center, I was outside most of the time as a technician and also as an environmental educator. And I was there for almost 9 months. That was my contract. I never once saw anyone cross the river or come through the property. And that's because I was also working with kids, taking them on nature hikes and pointing out birds and butterflies and things like that. Never did I ever see anyone cross. I just want to say that right now. I've also been working a lot with asylum seekers. And if some of you know, Title 42 is being lifted. That is the Remain in Mexico policy that was put during the Trump era and then recently during Biden, but it is being lifted, so that is a good thing. Our brothers and sisters are just wanting a better life, trying to seek asylum, and they're waiting on the other side of the river for us to help them. And right now, putting efforts in with some of my other community members to build a refugee camp that will be able to keep over 1,000 folks, so that way they're not vulnerable to the elements, cartel, federales. And so one of our main goals is trying to get it to keep them as safe as possible. They're coming from Guatemala, they're coming from Haiti, and so we're trying to build community and working relationships with other orgs. And we're all frontliners, because where I live, it's all border militarization. If I want to go to Austin or Corpus and see some friends, I have to pass through an internal checkpoint where they will ask me, are you an American citizen? Where are you going? How long will you be there? Is this your car? Who does this car belong to? When will you be back? Who will you be staying with? What is it your business? It's not your business. And that is some of the stuff that we deal with down there. And what we're doing is we're coming together because we're tired, but because we're resilient, because our ancestors are guiding us. And because one thing that I will talk about as far as one of the values is one we have in another goal is joy. If it doesn't bring us joy, then we stop and we examine it and we look at it to see where it is that we're not finding the joy. Because with joy and love is what helps us to continue this work. Loving yourself, loving your neighbor, loving your asylum seeker, your everybody. And yes, it takes time, but you know what? With love, you can go a long way. I am here today because my parents loved me, because my friends never gave up on me, even when I was a hot mess in my 20s. They did not give up on me. So, I just want to put that as something that I feel is very important to community building, especially as we're working on so many different things, is I want you all to know that, loving yourself. I love you. If you don't love yourself today, I will love you. So I know I kind of went off a little. I get emotional with this stuff, but I love my AGIP fam. So I know we're live streaming. Sorry, guys.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
We act. We empower and organize low-income people of color to build healthy communities for all. Welcome, Sonal. Can you help us to understand more about We Act for Environmental Justice?
I can, and thank you. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for having me. I agree, this is kind of nerve-wracking. I'm used to Zoom panels these days. We Act is a community-based organization based in Harlem. We're only 30 blocks north of here. We are based in West Harlem. And since 1988, We Act for Environmental Justice has been organizing communities of color and low income, particularly in Harlem, Washington Heights, and Inwood, against environmental racism. In particular, what we're trying to achieve is healthy communities. That's our ultimate goal, and I think that's why we see a lot of overlap with abolition and criminal justice advocacy in any way. Our organization engages in community organizing. We also do policy work, education, and research. I direct the policy at We Act for our city and state initiatives that we work on. And we have, our organization started when the North River sewage treatment plant was being placed on the west side of Harlem. I'm sure some of you were around when that happened. I was not, but it was considered a really big act of environmental racism. At that time, Harlem was a place that was already heavily polluted, had 9 out of the 10 bus depots in Manhattan placed up in Harlem, and a number of other environmental stressors that were leading to very, very toxic air. So the asthma rates were around 10 times the New York City average at that time. And it's gotten better, but we still have higher than average asthma rates in Harlem and in a lot of communities of color around New York City. And so over the years, we have engaged in a lot of different topics around environmental justice, particularly this topic around land use and toxic pollution in neighborhoods. We also focus on healthy housing. There's also a big focus, particularly on NYCHA housing when it comes to that, because a lot of our members live in NYCHA houses across northern Manhattan. And we also work on things like transportation. How do we make sure that people that don't have private cars or live far away from their jobs or are going to school across the city have access to affordable public transit that is also clean and doesn't pollute the air. So one of our most famous campaigns when in the early days of We Act was a Ditch Dirty Diesel campaign in the 90s into early 2000s. And the slogan was breathe at your own risk. Northern Manhattan is covered in toxic air, and that's because of the dirty diesel buses that MTA runs up and down the blocks here. And so We Act at that time engaged in heavy community organizing to bring community members to fight this toxic pollution. And what resulted after a 10-year fight was MTA buses converting away from diesel to now there's like a hydroelectric and all sorts of like biodiesel, I guess is some of it, though we don't like that. And some other sources that have led to a healthier air quality. And so that's just some examples of the work that we do. But now we're really starting to pivot and focus on climate change because that crisis is getting worse and worse. It's particularly impacting communities of color and low income. The term sacrifice zone is one that we use a lot. People are exposed to flooding. Extreme heat is actually one of the biggest problems in northern Manhattan right now. And it is actually the biggest cause of weather-related death in the United States, but we don't think about it that way. But it's getting worse. And so we engage in a lot of these topics with community members to envision what they want to see in their neighborhoods. And then my job is to take community members, take those solutions and turn it into tangible policy change that we advocate for at the city and the state. So I'll stop there, but that's just the start of the work that We Act does.
Just the start. You know, I came out of federal prison in 2011, and I'm not sure if it were what year, the next year, 2012, came to Beyond the Bars and saw Laura Whitehorn, and whether she'll remember, Laura has been together forever, but whether she remembers this moment, I ran over to her and I felt that I had met a real leader for us. And she looked at me like, what is wrong with you? But have learned so much over the years from Laura and from Kathy and from Mujahid, who I miss incredibly. But Laura, tell us about RAP.
So, RAP, Release Aging People in Prison. But first, I just want to say thank you, Cheryl, Cameron, everyone, and especially to Kathy. I wish you were here, but because you're not, I can say something about you that I couldn't say to your face, which is that I feel like in general, I am the luckiest person in the world because I've gotten to be part of so many wonderful struggles and liberation movements and support of them over the years and met so many amazing people, but also because for the last 40 years, I guess, Kathy and I have been doing our lives and our politics together, sometimes legal, sometimes illegal, but always together. And she is one of the most amazing people could ever have. So in I think it was 2011, so I'm gonna get down and dirty about this thing about violence and nonviolence, because I think all of this has to happen in practice. It's one thing for us all. I mean, I believe in so many great things that I cannot put into practice, or, it takes a lot. But this one, we can and must. So the reason that release aging people in prison started, and it was started by Mujahid Farid, who we miss every day, brilliant fucking jailhouse lawyer, Muslim, serious man, and Kathy and me, with the support of Sophia Elijah, who was then at the Correctional Association and gave us meeting space and everything else. We said there were a lot of people getting out of prison then, because there had been this thing called mass incarceration, which we all know was a boom in the number of people in prison. And a lot of people were in for low-level crimes and got out, and there were organizations starting to organize around the prison system, and they were all talking about low-level, nonviolent crimes. And people with those crimes they shouldn't even have been given bail, much less go to prison. That's true. But if we took away all of those cases in every state and the federal system, we would still have a booming, aging, suffering, and dying population of people in prison. And those people were Black and brown and indigenous. And we saw it, all three of us agreed that it was a strategy to keep communities from resisting the kind of oppression and poverty and disaster that we've been talking about, whether it's environmental or medical or anything else, and that we had to do something to get to the heart of this fucking system that was criminalizing Black people. And we were all people who had crimes of violence that we had done time for. And Farid had been in with David Gilbert, who we're celebrating, just got out after almost 50 years. And they had done a lot of work together. So, and he had been in with Jalil Mundakim, he knew Herman Bell. So we were all on that cusp between fighting for political prisoners and fighting against the very systems that's why there were political prisoners, because they were fighting against these systems. And it was actually Eddie Ellis who first said to me, you guys should look at the aging prison population. And then it was Dave, and then it was Herman. And so the three of us sat down and we decided to call our group, which I'm very, very sorry, Release Aging People in Prison. No one ever gets it right. Release Aging People from Prison. We just made it up on the spot. But the point was that we were going to do what we could to work on the issue of people convicted of violence who had long sentences. And in New York State, we were very fortunate because in 2011, into the executive law governing parole had been put a phrase, risk and needs assessments, that somehow there needed to be a look at the risk that a person posed and the needs that they had in order to live a lawful life when they got out or something like that. And so we seized on that. And we said, well, if you're going to look at risk, most of the people in prison, and certainly the people who have done long time, weren't a danger in the first place to anyone beyond the particular person that they had done violence to, and that could have been resolved. But certainly after 30, 40 years, they are no longer, by anyone's measure, a risk. So we started with the parole board, and we organized masses of people to change the regulations that the parole board used a couple of times. We organized to change the commissioners so that there were some better commissioners. And lo and behold, people started getting out. And then the Democrats and progressive Democrats won some elections in the Assembly and the whole legislature of the Senate. So we said maybe we can make a fundamental change. And so formerly incarcerated people, jailhouse lawyers, wrote two bills. One is elder parole, and it says that if you're 55 or older and you've done 15 years, you get to go to the board no matter what your sentence was. So that bill will do away with life without parole and death by incarceration. And the other bill is the fair and timely parole bill, which if I had more time, and because I know anyone who's been before the parole board or any jailhouse lawyers here would love to hear about the language change. But to me, the biggest change, besides saying you have to They have to look at who you are now and not the crime you did however many years ago, is that it takes away this dangerous language that says if letting you out would so deprecate the seriousness of your crime as to undermine respect for the law. And that has been used against anyone who committed any kind of act against law enforcement or the military. And I love the way in this conference people have been talking about the militarized state as all one piece. That has been used against people forever. So that language would be out. So we're fighting for those bills, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next thing. But what I do want to say is that we were told, and still are told all the time, if you will limit the elder parole law to people who did not commit crimes against police and certain other very high-level crimes, you can get it passed. And we said, fuck that. We are not doing it. And the reason we're not doing it is partly because we believe very deeply in solidarity, but we don't think anything can be done with that solidarity. But it's also partly because if we do that, we are creating more and more classes of the undeserving, as someone said. And I wish Jose Saldana could have been sitting here instead of me, but he's up in Albany working, but he could do this so much better than I can. But he says all the time, for Black people, for Puerto Rican people, we have been kicked out of every list. Every list was everyone but. All the rights go to everyone but. So why do we want to build a movement that has everyone but? And I want to make, not now, because I know my time on this round is up, I am going to
Take
make
your time.
a plea for you all to join us, to come to Albany, to march and scream and yell. And I'll talk about that in a minute, and Jeannie and Ross will help sign you up. But we've got to, we need everyone together to do this.
Laura, you help us segue into another question that I have for y'all. All of you are organizing, and you're organizing with the power of the people. What are the practices you're engaged in the work that you do? Richard, you want to kick us off?
What about this thing? So yeah, the practices, I spoke a little bit about them earlier. So what we practice is we try to create a safe environment. And we try to create that environment of safety, whether it's in the Santa Cruz Hill or at the Reentry House in Oakland, or whether it's in prison. That room, that circle that we build with relationship, we try to create that atmosphere of safety to where people can be vulnerable and people can work on things that they've been harmed by the system, by things of the past, by this culture out here. So that way the people can do some healing and like we can trust in each other, and we don't need a system to do it, but we're creating a culture to do it with ourselves. And those are the principles that we live by every day in our organization, is just to be that vulnerable. Talk about the real stuff, what's really going on with you. Call it the four rivers. Like you'll give us that surface emotion, and then what's really under there. And then we'll get to that stuff that's really deep, that helplessness, that worthlessness. And where did that come from? What traumas in the past? And when people ask me what my job is, I said, my job is to take care of the people taking care of the people. I'm setting up the space so you can come do your healing because you're helping so many others, but who's helping you? Like, where's that space for you to come and process? That space for you to decompress. And like, that's the space that we want to do, and that's the value that we're working in. And, whether it's systemic or personal, we all have problems. We were having a retreat with a lot of formerly incarcerated people that went through the system, did years and doing remarkable work in Santa Cruz, and just like 7 of us men that were formerly incarcerated, did various years around the country, had an impromptu meeting down at the lower house, we call it the lower house, and we just started talking about all the stuff that comes up for men when they get out that we never talk about with anybody else. We won't talk about it with our partners. We won't talk about it in the open. And it was just a beautiful group, and everybody there wanted it more because we were open and honest and vulnerable with each other, honest and vulnerable. And we need that more. And those are the spaces that we want to create. And that's the value that we're working under, is that vulnerability and that trust. And if we can create that space to where people can do that, then I'm happy. And that's the thing I want to see. And so that's what we'll do.
So important. Patricia, what are those practices that you're engaged in and building from?
So, and another Gulf is possible. This is also referencing the first question. There's about 10 of us, and so we all have our own projects, and we have representation in each state all along the Gulf of Mexico. So that's why I was sharing more about what I was doing, is because that's what I can answer to. But one thing is part of our values is I'll go back to is joy. And right now we're going through some very critical times. And there's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of grief, there's a lot of pain. However, we believe that if we work together as a community, we have transparency, we engage in transformative justice if that's the need, but that we never give up on each other. And if that means that we need to take a break, we take a break. And we apply that to all of our projects as well. Because one thing is that you have to take care of yourself in order to do this work, because it can be so strenuous. And the thing is, the fight is always going to be there. So if you have to take a break, we always encourage each other, take your break. The fight is going to be here when you come back. We're going to hold down until you get back. And that's something that I also like to apply with my community projects that I am able to do through Another Gulf is Possible. And one thing I'll talk about is what we call community care bear. So whenever you're working on something, you know, if you can find somebody to be your community care bear, which is the one that kind of like checks the vibes, makes sure people are drinking water, you're doing a long session because you're getting ready for a march or something like that, you know, take care of each other. And then also, I say that because I'm the community care bear. So it's me and Bianca. And so, you know, that's one of the things that we really strive for at Another Gulf is Possible, is to take care of ourselves, because that is the best way that we can be effective leaders in our community and also lead by example. So when we take care of ourselves, we're taking care of each other, we're being inspiration, and also, you know, rotating leadership. It's some of the best practices that have worked for us, and hopefully it works for you all in your efforts.
Thank you. Well, to you, Sonu.
Yeah, I think, so WEAC's theory of change is essentially ask community what the problem is, ask community what the solution is, take community to advocate for policy change, and I'll have my Albany pitch as well to join us, and then ultimately result in healthier community. And so, you know, I don't have organizer in my title. We have organizers at WEAC that are much better at it than me, but they go out there and they, you know, bring the policy lessons and lessons of how to do advocacy work, lessons of what laws exist that protect you, what laws don't yet exist that need to, and try to really build capacity amongst the public to be able to advocate for the issues that they want to see solved themselves. So that's an important practice we do at WEACT, is really that educational piece, the capacity building piece, to ultimately, you know, when WEACT staff is there, everyone knows what to do. And so that's an important practice. And the other thing that is something we engage in very consistently is respectfully yelling at our legislators. I personally find that to be very cathartic. And it's an important part of the work that we do to hold hold our decision makers accountable and really reveal the lack of action or not good enough action that the legislators take and bring that to people and say, this is what we found, what do we do about it? And I think that those two things are critical also because it not only gives me guidance and our team guidance of what we need to focus on, but really increases awareness on all the issues we work on with the community members that we work with, especially because I think this is a constant sort of strategy we're always trying to learn in the environment and climate space is how do we deal with the fact that people who are impacted most by environmental injustice, impacted most by what we now call climate justice, but are also dealing with really immediate issues of housing insecurity and medical insecurity and food insecurity and water insecurity, and how do we balance that work? So it does take a lot of time and effort to really show people how all of these issues are very, very interconnected, and I think that's an important space that we're also in.
Thank you. Oh, we rely on you all the time to help us with practice.
So I need help with this. Can everyone who's formerly incarcerated or has had a loved one incarcerated stand up? Okay, so this is what we do. Because it's like that thing that Nadia, if you're still here, I love that thing you said about putting on the enslaved people's clothing and then people would see. Because at RAP, when we started, our first order of business was to go to all the long-termers that we knew who'd gotten out, which was a lot of people, and ask them for them and their family members to join us doing this work. And I'm going to be honest, we had a hard time. And we had a hard time because we were tiny and no one thought we would get anywhere. And we had such a radical agenda. And as we began to succeed, and the way that we succeeded was by organizing, old-fashioned. It wasn't online, I'm sorry to say, Melissa, oh my God, I don't know how to use it. It was person-to-person, old-school organizing. We call them, nowadays they're called one-on-ones. We never called them that, right? One-on-ones. And going out, and the reason there are very few people from RAP here today, and poor Jeannie and Ross have to hold down the table, is because we've got a lot of people out doing door knocking. We have knocked on, what did Dave say, like 1,000 doors around the state and talked to 1,000 people and gotten, not all of them, but a lot of them to write postcards and to join our work over the last few months. And so we started doing that, but we reached out we kept on reaching out to communities. And because, like you, our issue came from people inside. I mean, that was what, really, when I was inside, you asked me, what would you like? Would you like a salad bar? Would you like, cleaner clothes? Would you like it to smell better in here? Yeah, but what do you really want? I'm gonna get the fuck out of here. And so people wanted parole in New York State. It was a fucked up system and people knew it could be fixed. So I think that has been, some of our advocacy days, which, going up to Albany, it's fun while you're yelling, but getting on the bus at 6 a.m. and all of that. But there's a feeling of joy, of feeling our power, because alone we feel so powerless. And I don't know, Jeannie, I think you said it, I think Lisette said it, some of our community leaders said it, that when you're isolated and you have someone in prison and people around you are telling you, oh, don't talk about that, or, running you down, or whatever shit they're doing, you feel alone and you feel powerless. But when you get on a bus and you meet 5 other, 10 other, 20 other people in the same situation, whose lives and their loved ones' lives also depend on what we're all doing, then you feel powerful. We also do try to do some healing stuff. We sometimes we're working on it. We've sometimes had some support groups and stuff like that because we really need it. And we do we're a collective. That's what RAP functions as a collective. It's a little different from a lot of organizations. So we have collective meetings every 2 weeks, which have a lot to do with what people are going through. We do some partying. Cookie, okay, anyway, we won't get into that. But I think the thing is, you know, just one other thing, this last period in New York has been dire because the fucking new governor and some of the legislature wanted to roll back the tiny bit of advances that we had in bail reform. So 3 weeks ago, we have a coalition called the People's Campaign for Parole Justice, where we have 16 organizations that are part of the steering committee and 350 organizations around the state that are signed on to this agenda. And we decided as a group, the entire steering committee, to stop agitating for parole until the budget was passed so that we could join the struggle against the rollbacks. And we were up in Albany almost every day. And the unity that got built among groups that had never met each other before, because the governor's budget was also screwing people who wanted home health aides to be paid, people who didn't want their money going to a stadium, you know, and the solidarity that was built there is exactly what we're talking about here today. So just, and then I'll shut up. I think it has to happen in practice. It happens in meetings and in discussions, but it has to happen in practice where we unite and we say, okay, look, here's a weak point in the legislative agenda. Let's go for it with these issues together.
Yeah, and this is my next question. I know at the National Council, this is a practice. There's practices, and then this is a practice. The organizing with our people is a practice, and we have struggled over the years to get better, to figure it out. But my next question, what it means and takes to build healthy and value-aligned organizations. This is a real question, y'all. And all of you who are deep in organizing understand how challenging this question is. So I'll just keep in our order, Richard, if you want.
So organizing and, well, just this whole nonprofit, corporate, and different world is it's hard. It's hard to want to walk that line of like, I have to do all these things to be a nonprofit. And I have to walk this line, I have to do this certain things, have these insurances, do all this stuff. And at the same time want to live in these other values and have the organization be in that other value. And so that gets real hard, and it's a hard line to walk. And there's a lot of things that butt up against it. And what I mean by that is like we work off a needs value. Like we always talk about, what do people need? Let's put that first and foremost instead of first come, first serve. And that's hard to do in an organization where somebody comes and says, oh, I asked first, why don't I get it? Because they're bringing all the stuff from any other job that they ever had, from incarceration. They're bringing those stuffs with us to the organizations. And we have to sit down and we have to talk about this. We have to talk about the power dynamics that are in an organization all the time, and talk about how people give away their agency and how it's assumed that when somebody is in a power situation, is I'm one of the EDs, I co-ED, and so when I say something, I give an opinion, it's taken as a directive. And that's not how I wanted it to be taken, but that's how it's taken because you said it. And so walking that line and trying to get that understanding with people that we work with is very hard. We have to keep having that conversation over and over and over again. And that plus like the purist mentality that's out there of like, you need to be all like this or you need to be all like that. And if you even walk in the nonprofit sector at all, you're a sellout. And so like there's this purist mentality that's canceling each other out, and that's a divide, and it's a cancer within the organizing movement. And I heard it said earlier, like, if you can show me a pure ass collective in this country, let me know. I want to watch. I want to go learn from them, because we haven't done it ourselves. We're a hybrid. We're like, it's okay. Sometimes we get through there. Sometimes we can't. Because there's sometimes I tell staff, we have to do it like this. Why? If not, we're going to get audited by the RS. Like, we can't. We're gonna lose everything, and we'll have nothing. We won't be able to do any of this healing work anymore. So it's a struggle every day to go through that. And another struggle we have is, like, we also have a funding. We do some funding, or we redistribute funding. We have relationships with funders that give us money to redistribute, and we give it to only people, BIPOC-led organizations, grassroots organizations in this country. They're coming first. And that's a hard thing to fight against in this world. And so we don't have this hard line of, like, you need reports, you need all this shit that the government asks you for in grants. I think we asked like 4 questions. What are you going to do with the money? What are you going to do? I don't care if you use it for health insurance. That's the first time you got it. Great. It's like, it's very simple, and, like, we want to take out all this red tape and this bureaucracy that's out there. And so fighting against all that is very hard, and it's done in the background, and a lot of people don't see the work that's done in the background that people are doing. They only see, oh, we had a group, or we had some healing work, but all the thing that goes into that, all the stuff and all the work that our staff and everybody put into that, and appreciating that work. And so that's the struggle that we have, is walking that line all the time.
Patricia, speaking of lines, are there lines that you draw in the sand when you're building what you envision as that healthy organization, that values-aligned organization? Are there times when there has to be a line drawn in the sand?
Oops, sorry. I think it's a little, it all depends on the situation, on what you're organizing for, because so many different needs, so many different causes have different needs, and will have different lines in the sand, boundaries, or you'll need to place more value on something compared to, the other situation. And, when you're working on that, it's like an evolution of your it's like growing a garden. Okay, you worked on the soil. Okay, you're working on your collaborative, your nonprofit. You plant the seeds. You start having your mission statements. All that good stuff. And you start reaching out to people to donate, get yourself started. But it's all about the growth that you have with your collaborative or your nonprofit that helps you define, like, when it is time for boundaries. Because it's also about your relationship, working with each other. Of course, your cause, right? Of course, comunidad, moving forward in trust and community. Yes, but also it's about your relationships, and because that's what you're going to take to the community. So you need to remember, however your group works, you're taking that to the community. And if you want to work together, they're going to vibe that. They're going to feel that. And so I feel like it depends on what exactly, you're working on. And that's how you're able to define when it's time to, like, this is the line. Or this is where, like, zero tolerance for ABC, And so I think it's kind of situational, but I think ultimately, as long as you're and you're looking at your community or whatever demographic you're looking at, and you're looking at the needs, then that's when you're on your way. And hopefully you won't have to put up too many boundaries, so that way you can grow and just be without limit. But I think it all depends on like what you're actually organizing for and whom, because everybody's different, cultural differences, all sorts of stuff. There's so many things to consider. So, yeah.
So now is there a process that you use to navigate through this kind of decision?
In theory, there is. In practice, it feels a little more chaotic. Every year, we have to go through a policy planning agenda process. You can find it on our website, where we have a policy agenda for the year. This year, we decided to start with some values and some principles of what we are trying to do in the big vision for the year. And that was in an effort to not take on too much else and try to be really targeted with the work. I think everyone probably can sympathize with being asked to do a lot more than you can. And I think that's part of the exploitation of people that care, that you don't want to say no to anything, and you want to work on all of the problems that people bring to you and all of the bills that need to get passed, and health of people are in the balance for every single legislation that is brought to our desks, and it's hard to balance that. And so we have made an attempt to have some principles when it comes to the work we're focusing on, and it's been helpful. At times, though, we can't stick to it. For example, we have members, I don't know if people probably do live uptown in Harlem, Washington Heights, and Inwood. And I've noticed this even outside of these neighborhoods, but sanitation is terrible right now, right? There's rats everywhere, there's trash everywhere. And the mayor proposed a huge sanitation budget cut. So what do? We kind of have to react to that, so priorities out the window. Now we have to focus on something that really is pressing and important for the health of people and the environment. So we try to have, our values really keep us focused, but at the same time, our values mean that we also diverge from our plans. But one thing that also makes it difficult is funding. It's a consistent frustration that getting money, being able to pay staff, being able to rent a building, being able to do everything you want to do lies in the decision of someone else, and what they view as priorities. I think research from Dr. Ana Baptista, who works at the New School, came out with a statistic that said environmental justice organizations across the United States are given about 2% of the funding for environment and climate work, as compared to big green groups like NRDC or Oceana, these big groups that have never historically cared about Black and brown people ever in their work. And so now we get pushed to do work in a lane that is based on where we can get money for it. And that can get very frustrating. That is when you have to say, like, okay, how do we balance the need to pay staff with all of these things that we find to be valuable issues? I think one of the best examples is childhood lead poisoning. I'm sure a lot of you have had primary experience with this. There's about 11,000 children in New York City that have elevated blood lead levels. It lowers IQ for a lifetime. It leads to developmental delays for a lifetime. It is irreversible, yet nothing really is done about it. Very little, I would consider. And it's an issue that is an issue of children of color. 80% of lead poisoning cases in New York City are Black, African American, Latinx, Asian children. We spent the past 6 months, maybe more, trying to get our governor to fund $1 billion to address this issue, and we got pennies on the dollar. And it's not an issue that we easily get funding to actually work on in a deeper level, even though it's one of the biggest environmental injustices that exists in New York City currently. And so that is the kind of real world problem that comes up in the organization when figuring out how do we balance the work, how do we make sure that we're focusing on what we need to focus on, but how do we also make sure that our staff get paid and have health insurance and can take time off and do what they need to do. And I'll say with lead poisoning, actually lately it's been connected to children that are criminalized, and that's always Black and brown children because of it leads to behavioral problems at school, which we know is very connected to criminalization of children. So it's a very good example of where these issues really intersect, and it's frustrating when the powers that be have decided it's not important, so we can't focus on it to the amount that we want to.
Laura, when we're talking about, thank you so much. I want to ask you a quick, just to bring another aspect of this into this. When we're talking about building a value-aligned organization, Laura, and we've had to come to RAP and ask for guidance and help. When we're also working with value-aligned organizations inside, and there's at times, because of what you just said, people want to get the fuck out. There are things that are brought to us, and our values won't allow us to get behind. Talk a little bit about that while we are still wanting to be in support of what's happening on the inside.
Yeah, first, I just want to say that was breathtaking. I mean, the fact that we're still fucking fighting about that. The Young Lords did a garbage strike, dumped garbage in the streets of East Harlem back in the 70s to get attention to that. The lead poisoning, the sickle cell, all of those things. So I want to talk to you afterwards and hear more about it. But,
Building.
okay, wait. Oh, yeah. So it's similar what Ruthie was saying earlier, although I don't totally agree with her. I think about there are people who get out of prison who have bad politics, or some people who want to. Of course, there are people everywhere, but still, if we don't have a movement that is fueled and led by the people who understand and have lived the torture of the problem, then we're not going to have a very powerful movement. But we do need to struggle openly. We had that in the beginning of RAP. There was someone inside in a prison who had a proposal for a bill that would literally have excluded people convicted of killing a cop. And we had to have struggle with the person. We did. We said we can't support this. And we were told, and this is the hard part about it, this is easy. Standing up here saying, we have to fight for everyone, yay, everyone's gonna say yay, everyone, oh, Laura, isn't she great? That shit is so fucking easy. What's hard is when someone says to you, my loved one has a murder that is not a police officer, and if you would fix your bill, he could get out, she could get out. That's hard. Being told we're bartering lives, that is really hard. And that's when it has to come back to not just values, but also strategy and a vision, which I guess is what we're supposed to be talking about. And that vision, to me, when people were talking in the last panel about how hard it is in the years, You know, in 75, I guess, I went to Vietnam right after the victory over the United States on a very small trip sponsored by the Vietnam Women's Union. And I traveled through, the north. We couldn't go to the south yet because there were still so many bombs and the CIA was still active, but we went to, and everywhere we went, people repeated the same thing. We've been fighting for our liberation for 2,000 years. And we went, we're Americans, we want it tomorrow, but it was encouraging to me because also, I'm about to turn 77. I was born in 1945 at the end of the Second World War. Part of my politics about the line in the sand is we don't throw anyone under the bus comes from that I grew up during the Red Scare. And I saw what happened, and I saw what I thought of people who went into that committee and named the names of their family members, their friends. And and I thought, well, what happens to the person who names the names and how they get destroyed too? So I think it takes sometimes having a kind of a hard heart at the same time as having a very warm heart, because you have to, I think we are at a moment in this country where we've seen what happens when we barter away some lives. Now we have millions and millions of people in prison and millions more of destroyed families and destroyed communities. And if we keep doing that, we'll really be in trouble. I want to say one other thing, because this is a bottom line for RAP too. We don't accept any abuse of women or queers or gender non-conforming people. And it is a principle. And when someone did something like that once in a situation, we tried to do an intervention and accountability and stuff. And if there's no accountability, the person just gets cut out. And I feel like we're building a movement that has a chance to be better on these issues, and already is, than the movement that I was in the 60s and 70s, which was still like, recognizing that women got to speak in meetings. So I think that's another one that's for the future. I find that very hard when people, and the other thing we do is we do clemency work, where we have a Hope Will Bring Them Home campaign. And clemency is a hard one because you go for clemency as an individual.
Yes.
And we're trying to create a system of mass clemency and demand mass clemency. And we accept and we fight for every single person who wants clemency, but we don't ever say this person is more deserving than the other, or that kind of stuff. And that's hard too, because someone's fucking innocent and got railroaded. They have a right to say it. It's just hard when you say it as the organization and then you say, so that person should get out, That's just my last point. Just to quote Brian Stevenson. Brian Stevenson once said about the death penalty, the point isn't does the person deserve to die, the point is do we deserve to kill? And so we have to look at what it does to the society as a whole to change it. That's the best answer I can give. I stay up at night worrying about this, so that was not the full answer. And why don't you answer that question, Andrew James? I deal with it all the time because women in our organization ask you.
And we're fighting this individual exceptionalism. We're fighting these unpoliticized celebrities that just think that one-offs are going to make it happen. And we're fighting for a system of en masse, let our people out. And we're always in this constant state of struggle. For us, we have women who are dying, and we are fighting. We've lost women since our 100-day campaign, 100 Women, 100-day campaign started. Many of our 100 women have died. And so some of the decisions that we make are based on life and death. This person will not be here unless, she is able to come home, and we're fighting for the opportunity to bring her home to her family. So there's so many intricacies and complexities involved, particularly in the clemency work, that makes this so challenging. So
And
challenging.
also, okay, now you should never give me this mic, and I have questions for you. So when we started the National Council, and people said you're only talking about women,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
what did we say?
Kathy actually put me on the phone with Angela, and Angela set me straight. She said, you damn well better believe that we need a gender analysis on this shit. So we did it because of the time. Timing is, the National Council, we ask two questions all the time, timing and messenger. Sometimes when there's a tension, the timing's not right. Sometimes when there's a tension, the messenger's not right. Sometimes when there's tension, both of them, whatever, any combination of that. For us, we were, at the time, in prison in 2010, which was a particularly active year in bringing attention to mass incarceration because of all the things that were happening in the country. The Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow, even Piper Kerman's personal memoir, but also the American Legislative Exchange Council, all of the nefarious work of these billionaires who had built the infrastructure for mass incarceration, and that scathing Center for Democracy a report that started to come out. And that's what we were hearing inside of a women's prison at the camp where I was, and down the hill at the FCI, where at that time there were about 2,000 women crammed into this entire prison. And we heard nothing about us, absolutely nothing. And so we were unapologetic. We started to organize in the prison because of that. And we continue to be unapologetic about it, but with the help of Kathy, and always you guys putting us in front of folks that can help us, women who can help us to figure this out. We were able to, and still are able to, stand unapologetically on working on behalf of women, girls, trans and gender nonconforming people. And we'll continue to do that. We're going to round it out because we will be here all day. This is my learning session. I'm trying to ask all these questions so I can go back and hopefully do some better work. But want to just, as our last question for the afternoon, for all of you, how do you make sense of the enormity? I mean, I'm overwhelmed. I gotta be honest with you. I'm completely overwhelmed. Right? But how do we make sense of the enormity of the struggles we're facing and the speed at which change is happening? Come on, Richard, bring us home.
So I did 30 years, so I'm good at a slow pace. I was in solitary
Soon
for
comes,
years.
right?
I was supposed to spend the rest of my life in the hole. And so I could deal with patience. I got patience. I know how to deal with patience. And so, I know that this big change, I've come to grips with this big change is not going to happen in my lifetime. And I'm okay with that, but I'm going to teach our children and I'm going to plant some seeds. And I always remember this story. This is how I grapple with it. I always remember this story of I can't save the world. I'm not fucking Superman or anything like that. So there's a starfish story of a little girl and her father walking along the beach. And there's many starfish that came up, the tides brought up. And she's walking with her father. She grabs one and she throws it in. She walks over, grabs another one, throws it in. Her father's like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Well, I'm putting them back in the sea." And but there's hundreds and thousands of starfish. What's it matter? She goes, "Well," she picks up another one. She goes, "It matters to this one." And she throws it in. And so every day as I go through this, and we have a limited amount of resource and space, but I know it matters to those people in our reentry house. I know it matters to those people that got some refunding. I know it matters to those people who come to Santa Cruz. And if I could just do that, like, be involved in that, with that little bit of healing and that little bit of work, that's all I can do in this lifetime, and I'm cool with that. I just have to live with that.
I'm gonna remember the starfish story. Patricia.
So I had everything written out. I did it like 4 different times and never did it work out, you know?
Worked out just fine.
I love you. I love all of you. This was one of the questions that when Cameron sent the questions, like, that I stopped and I really thought about it. And I was just like, okay, I live on the Tex-Mex border. We have Elon Musk colonizing one of our towns, launching his toxic space rockets, trying to close access to the poor people's beach. Some people, that's how they get their food. They go fish and come back. There's a reason why it's called the poor people's beach. It's because you didn't have to worry about paying an entrance fee or anything like that. And now he's causing gentrification, the rise of rent, and people are now slowly being displaced. And then we have border militarization, and it's disgusting. And, you know, my friends and I, we do a lot of actions, we do a lot of organizing, and, you know, and like I said, when I worked at the Butterfly Center, all I wanted to do was show kids some pretty butterflies. And then I have a Border Patrol helicopter flying right over me. And there's a part of me that's like, why couldn't you wait till the children left? How necessary was it for you to do this during a field trip? Because you want to show that you think you have more power, but you don't. I'm not falling for that stuff. I'm not falling for that stuff no more. I'm gonna be 39 April 22nd. Thank you very much. There was a counselor, and real quick, there was a counselor that told my mom, because, you know, I have chronic illness, I have health issues. And during a time where, you know, I was going through some behavior stuff, and a therapist told my mom, you might want to be ready for anything in case something happens to Patricia again. And my mom was like, what do you mean? Well, just, you never know. And my mom was like, what do you mean? I got my child in ICU here. Like, what are you talking about, you know? And she said, well, you know, she might not make it to C-17. I'm going to be 39 April 22nd. And so, you know, my friends and I, we're working about fighting pipelines. We're just trying to fight for our people, nuestra gente, because like where I'm from, we're always either the first or the second poorest county in all of Texas. Everybody's on Medicaid or Medicare. No one has health insurance. Often people are on government assistance. I was on government assistance for 20 years. And when people try to say, oh, they just want takeouts, they just want this or this, it's like, do you know how hard it is to get on disability? Do you know how hard it is to keep that? And how crappy it is to stay under the poverty line just so you can have medication? It's horrible. And then there's also just the tension between even just, you know, the groups, whether it be colorism or internal racism, because of all the oppression that was done to us. They forced us to stay at the most southern tip of Texas. They didn't want us to be a part of America. That is why there's so much there in people's eyes as opportunities, but it's because we're poor. It's because no one let us have resources. And then whatever resources were there, they kept for themselves because they didn't want people of color to thrive. And so when my friends and I are doing this fight and we're, trying to help the asylum seekers, we're trying to, not lose any more habitat to like ugly things like pipelines or border walls, there's times where you feel like, why am I doing this again? Like, why am I doing this community meeting again? Why are we doing this postcard campaign again? But the thing is that, it's just, I think self-love, patience, oh my goodness, that's something I have to learn. My mom has always said, you were always fighting. She goes, if you saw someone who was being picked on, you had to go take care of it. If you saw something that would happen, you had to be a part of it. And I was like, well, I guess here I am today, right? So, thank you. It's just, I think love, patience, empathy, compassion, and also it's just incredible amounts of optimism has really helped me. And also our friends, just the fact that we're fighting for what our parents and grandparents went through, whether it was the fields, the factory, racism, border patrol, issues with immigration. It's that they went through so much so that we could thrive, so therefore we will thrive. White supremacy wants to see us down, they want to see us sick, they want to see us fail, and we refuse. So that is exactly how a lot of, like my friends in the movement, we may be down for a while, but we don't stay down because we know that that is what supremacy wants, and we refuse. So if we have to go take a nap, we'll go take a nap. We take a break, but we always come back because we refuse to let them win.
So now, my dad passed away on January 28th, and he was a foot soldier on behalf of environmental justice in our community of Roxbury, Massachusetts. He fought like hell to get all the buses moved from the bus yard that used to be across the street from the Orchard Park housing development, because all of the babies were struggling and suffering with respiratory issues, every kind of breathing ailment that you can imagine. And in going through all of the decades of work, not only on behalf of environmental justice, but everything, I realized, and he would say it to me all the time, go look in that box and pull that out. That might give you some guidance or give you some help. From stuff that they were doing in 1964 when I was born, so what is this for you? How do you move through this?
Yeah, I have to say, honestly, I don't know if I do it very well. I'm learning how to be optimistic and take care of myself. I think, there's an emerging field of clinical psychology called climate depression, where especially young people look at the state of the climate and say, how could this possibly be a livable place in 20 years, 30 years? It makes you think, like, should I have kids? It really makes you really think. Very scary questions you never even wanted to ever have to think about. Is where I'm living gonna be underwater in 10 years? Is another question we have to think about. Do I live in a basement apartment? Where now in New York City, every summer, we're gonna have hurricane and torrential downpours that we saw from Hurricane Ida are flooding basement apartments and killing people. So there's a huge problem that I think, is just not being addressed at the scale that it needs to, nowhere close. And then when you think about how it's being addressed in Black and brown communities, it's an even more dire picture. The day that the International Panel on Climate Change came out with their report this year, which was only about a week ago, and that is the report that basically tells us what is climate change looking like now for the world. And it basically said we only have a couple more years to do something, and incrementalism doesn't work, and stop it. That was around the same day we found out that our governor is not funding climate initiatives in the state. So, you know, these are the messages we're taking in, this is what we're hearing, but at the same time, I think what everyone else does here, or is learning here, is patience, definitely. Taking one issue at a time and focusing on it, recognizing that all of it has an impact, and really holding out the hope that you have based on the amazing people that you work with, especially in the climate space. And a lot of really young people getting very activated these days. The legislators, we have some awesome champions that are being elected and that are, you know, this is not my REACT hat on, but people are primarying legislators that haven't shown up. You know, all of that gives us hope, and there's movement towards groups that historically haven't even acknowledged environmental justice, finally acknowledging it. I really give credit to the Black Lives Matter movement for that. I think that it made groups have to recognize that Black and brown people are dealing with things differently from everyone else. I think all of that helps deal with the enormity of it. And yeah, we really just, you know, focus in on the things that we can control and try to deal with stress around the things that we can. So right now we're really pushing a package of 2 bills in the state that's going to stop the racist siting of toxic facilities in communities of color in New York State. Please join us on Earth Day to talk to legislators about it. And that's something that's taken a lot of my focus because it feels really impactful. It will create permanent changes in the way we look at how facilities are getting sited in communities. What Angela Davis started with when she talked about environmental justice, she said, you know, that is a historically very racist practice. And the state generally anywhere in the country hasn't looked at how a neighborhood is already dealing with more of a burden of toxics and environmental hazards and pollution. And now the state has to do that. They have to say, well, this neighborhood already has 12 power plants. Maybe we shouldn't put a 13th here. That, you know, working on issues like that is what helps me deal with the enormity, because it gives me a clear purpose, a clear end goal, but also being patient, knowing that you set a goal to get something done within a year. It's okay if it happens in 2. It's okay. You know, there's one that our organization worked on for 15 years, Child Safe Products Act, to get toxic chemicals out of children's toys. That took 15 years to get done in New York State. So I think, yeah, just recognizing that success will happen, you know, if you keep pushing and keep working on it.
Come on, my Laura.
So can I ask, Cameron, are you here, Melissa, whoever, can the links for the things that we're talking about be sent to everyone who's at this conference today so that people can sign up, people can donate, people can get connected, because I think that would be a good follow-up. I mean, one thing, I don't know what else to do besides keeping on going even if I'm tired, but one thing that's really encouraging to me is this conference and all the discussion about the cross issues and how they work together, because it's one Earth. That's where we started from, right? It's one Earth, it's stolen land, but it's the future is not yet totally stolen. One thing I find very encouraging in our work is that, in the criminal legal system, all that narrative that's out there, they put victims and perpetrators, people who create violence, who commit violence, people who are convicted of violence. And we talked about it for a long time, oh yeah, that's a fake dichotomy. Anyone who's been in prison knows that, what was it, in federal prison, like 89% of the women in federal prison, but when I was there, had experienced sexual abuse. Okay, so we know it's bullshit. But so now we're beginning to build a coalition that has within it survivor groups and RAP and Halt Solitary and the Parole Preparation Project. And we are, the advocacy day that I was talking about on April 25th is parole justice and survivor justice, because this is a way of, in the concrete, showing that the system must be abolished, because it only serves state violence and the police. It doesn't serve, if a victim of assault doesn't want to call the cops, then they're thrown aside by the system, and even if they do, they're not given any healing. So we're talking about actual in practice things that challenge the way the system works. And I don't know, I found this conversation all day really educational, and really, even though it's, okay, so the stuff we're facing is huge and depressing and awful, but we're facing it together. And so I find that kind of encouraging. My partner Susie Gay wants me to point out, because Jose couldn't be here and he says so much of this so much better and deeper than I do, that there's an interview that includes him that's on, which we can also send out, that's on the Verso Books website, about how RAP works with the history of Black liberation and Puerto Rican independence. And last thing, also, can we send out the petitions for Mutulu Shakur and Sundiata Acoli, so that people can sign to free all political prisoners.
Show our love for all of these beautiful, amazing folks. If this doesn't give us hope, I don't know what does. Thank you all. I want to say thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you. Thank you, Cam. Where are you, Cam? Hey, Cam. I want to say thank you to all my sisters who are in this struggle with us. Thank you so much. I think it's a wrap, folks.
Okay, not quite a wrap. In the words of God, the party ain't over. The party ain't over. Before we have one more really good offering for you. We have a musical group, Batala, who is going to come and they're going to play us out. But before then, we always take a quick moment to give it up for our current Beyond the Bars fellows. Can our fellows make it to the stage? We're coming up. Introduce the fellows for us. Yes, come on now, clap it up for them as they walk through. Yeah. Thank you so much. So, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to be really quick. The Beyond the Bars Fellows is a leadership development program that consists of people who are formerly incarcerated and directly impacted, as well as those from the Columbia community. And we come together, and it's a 9-month program, a stipend involved. And prior to COVID, they were very instrumental in helping to put on the conference. But since COVID, we have since created what we call solidarity projects, so that groups can work with organizations doing this work, community organizing, police violence, restorative justice. There are a number of projects that each group has decided to take on. So just want to introduce them and give them a couple people a minute or two to talk a little bit about their projects. But I want to thank them. They got here early this morning to help us, to set up, to serve, to do registration. And I just want to thank y'all so much. Could not have done this without you. So I'm just going to give this to Joelle because not that I'm biased towards any particular group, but Joelle and Mike are doing some amazing work with HALA, if y'all are familiar, How Our Lives Link All Together. And they're going to do a community healing circle around police violence. So I just want Joelle to talk a little bit about it. And if anybody else wants to talk about their project, you have all of 1 minute.
How's everybody doing? Thank you, Greer. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here, especially attending this conference and just learning so much and seeing all the inspiring work that's happening around here in the communities of the city. So as Greer mentioned, my group, with the focus on policing and police violence, we're doing a solidarity project in collaboration with HALA, a wonderful organization, some great folks out there. I love the energy that they bring to what we're doing. And we're fortunate enough to be doing or facilitating a healing circle, which is with the vision of, facilitating a conversation with community members who have been impacted by policing and police violence, and just sort of, building upon the conversations that need to be had about how policing affects, youth of color, people of color in our communities. And Mike is one of my partners here. I don't know if he wants to add anything else, but we're really looking forward to, keeping the energy and the momentum going with the fight that we're all doing.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michael. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael. So, like Joelle said, it's pretty much we're doing a police violence solidarity project. So, pretty much people in the neighborhood that's who've been impacted by violence. It's coming. It's gonna be doing like a circle. I think it's gonna be in a church in Harlem. It's gonna be in a church in Harlem. So. People have been impacted negatively by police brutality or violence. So, get to talk and heal and share their stories, how they've been impacted negatively. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm nervous. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So my name is Christine, and my partner from my solidarity project, she's not here, but we're focusing around the policies on informed consent at birth, where children are being taken away. We'll be working with JMAC families, so we'll be interviewing women who are impacted by this and working with the organization just to collaborate more and just make it aware that this is an issue going on and affecting many people of color. That's all I got to say.
Hi, everyone. I'm not going to speak about our Solidarity Project just because we've had a lot of bumps with ours. But the other day, earlier this past week, Tuesday, we kind of ended up wrapping up our fellowship for Beyond the Bars, or at least for our cohort. And one of the things that I reflected on was just our ability to come from different walks of life, but have this amazing opportunity to build community around social justice, which is obviously at the center of all of our hearts, and being able to come and put our collaborative efforts together and build change and also advocate. So this experience, I think, is extremely impactful, but also it does that community work. So I'm so thankful, especially to Greer, and all the work that she's done. Yes, clap it up. But all the work that she's done, but also being able to spend this past year with my fellow cohorts and all the work that we're able to do together as well. Thank you.
Yes, just a big shout out to Greer, to Waysheen, and to Chelsea for organizing this year. So much love to y'all.
Thank you so much. Can y'all just give a round of applause to the Beyond the Bars Fellows, cohort 2122? Yes, thank you so much. All right, God bless.
Thank you. And thank you all again for being here and spending your day with us. As they say, we know you could be anywhere, but you chose to be here, and that means a thing. Thank you again to the entire team at the Center for Justice, to Cheryl, to Kathy, to Cameron, to Geraldine. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I know from yours. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our dynamic closing performance from Batala, New York. Batala, New York is the premier all-woman Black-led drumming ensemble, bringing high-energy performances to the people of New York City through an engaging blend of cultural education and joyous entertainment.
Thank you again, everybody. Get home safely, be well, stay in touch, and until next year. Bye.